what if the person most likely to destroy you isn't your enemy? What if it's someone sitting at your table, someone who knows your name, someone you've shared your fears with, someone you call a friend? Most people spend their entire lives guarding against strangers. They build walls against the unknown. They stay suspicious of the outsider, the rival, the competition. But Nietzsche saw something far darker, something that cut closer to the bone. He observed that the most dangerous people in your life are almost never the ones you distrust. They are the ones you trust completely. The ones who smiled when you succeeded, but just a little too slowly. The ones who offered advice that always, somehow, kept you smaller. The ones who called themselves loyal while quietly feeding on your doubt. The disturbing truth is this: betrayal doesn't arrive wearing a warning sign. It arrives wearing the face of familiarity. Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." And here is what most people miss. Some of those people watching you soar, they were never cheering, they were waiting. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of human psychology we refuse to see. And nowhere does the shadow operate more freely than inside the relationships we think are safe. In this video, we are going to uncover types of dangerous people hiding in plain sight. The ones closest to you, the ones you trust, and by the end, you will never look at your inner circle the same way again. The first dangerous person in your life doesn't attack you. They comfort you. They are the one who shows up every time you are struggling and tells you exactly what you need to hear. They validate your pain. They echo your excuses. They assure you that you are fine just the way you are, even when you are not. Most people see this person as a gift, a supporter, a safe place. But what most people miss is the subtle trap embedded inside this relationship. The comfort killer doesn't want you to grow, not because they are evil, but because your stagnation is what makes them feel needed. Every time you rise, they lose their role. Every time you evolve, you slip further from their grasp. So unconsciously, and this is the key word, unconsciously, they keep you comfortable in the cage. They will say things like, "You don't need to change. You're already enough. Why push yourself so hard?" They say it softly. They say it lovingly. And it works precisely because it comes wrapped in warmth. This is what Jung described as psychic codependency, a dynamic where one person's emotional survival depends on keeping the other person emotionally paralyzed. Think about someone in your life right now. Someone who is always there when you fail, but oddly absent when you win. Someone who supports your lowest version, but subtly resists your highest one. That is not your safe place. That is your ceiling. Nietzsche understood this. He believed that genuine love, real love, demands that you encourage the other person to surpass themselves, not keep them frozen in comfort. Remember this: the person who only loves you at your worst is not your ally. They are your anchor. The second dangerous person never insults you directly. They are far too intelligent for that. Instead, they use a weapon more precise than any insult. They use doubt. They will ask just before your big moment, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" They will add a small caveat to every compliment. "You did well, considering everything you've been through." They will raise concerns that plant seeds of hesitation right when your confidence needs to be strongest. And when you confront them, they are shocked, genuinely puzzled. Because in their mind, and this is what makes them truly dangerous, they believe they are helping you. This is the most sophisticated form of psychological sabotage, because the saboteur doesn't know they're doing it. Schopenhauer had a term for this. He called it unconscious malice. The human instinct to diminish what threatens our sense of self-worth, disguised as concern. When you begin to rise, When your ambitions become real and your results become visible, you become a mirror to everyone around you. And for the people who have abandoned their own dreams, your progress is a confrontation they cannot handle. So they don't attack your goals. They attack your readiness for them. Real-life example. You've been working on a business for months. You finally share it with your closest friend. And instead of excitement, they offer a cautious list of reasons it might not work. They call it being realistic. But notice, they never applied that same realism to their own fears. The Stoics had an answer to this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, abandon without struggle." The insight of another person's doubt belongs to them, not to you. You are not obligated to carry it. The subtle underminer is dangerous, not because they destroy your plans. They are dangerous because they destroy your belief in yourself. The one thing no obstacle from the outside can touch. This person is magnetic. That is part of the danger. They draw you in with intensity, with vulnerability, with the kind of raw, emotional openness that makes you feel chosen, like they trust you with something real. And at first, you do feel chosen, because most people never let anyone see them this deeply. But over time, a pattern emerges that you try very hard not to notice. Every conversation eventually orbits around them. Every crisis is theirs. Every emotional emergency belongs to their life. And when something good happens to you, when you need to talk about your dreams, your victories, your fears, the conversation quietly, almost imperceptibly, redirects back to them. Nietzsche spoke about what he called the will to power, not as a desire to dominate others, but as the fundamental human drive to expand, to grow, to become. The emotional vampire has inverted this drive entirely. Unable to build their own inner world, they expand by consuming the emotional resources of others. Jung identified this pattern as the eternal victim archetype, a person who uses suffering as a form of social currency. It buys them attention, sympathy, and control, without requiring them to change anything about themselves. And here is the cruelest part of this dynamic. You feel guilty for noticing, because this person is in pain, because they have shared so much with you, because leaving feels like abandonment. But there is a profound difference between compassion and self-erasure. You can care for someone and still protect your energy. You can wish someone healing and still refuse to be their only source of it. The emotional vampire doesn't need a savior. They need a therapist, a practice, and the decision to take responsibility for their own inner life. That is not a role you can play for them. And every time you try, you pay with the very energy you need to build your own life. Few social dynamics are as quietly toxic as the person who turns everything into a competition, especially one they never openly declare. You get a promotion. They mention their salary. You lose weight. They note how much further they've come. You share a milestone. They respond with one of their own. And when you point it out, they seem genuinely confused. "I'm just sharing," they say. And perhaps they are. But the effect is always the same. You walk away from conversations with this person, feeling smaller than when you arrived. This is not accidental, even when it is unconscious. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he called ressentiment, a French word he used to describe a specific and insidious emotional state. It is the feeling of those who cannot create their own meaning, so instead they diminish the meaning others create. It is envy dressed in the costume of indifference. It is competition that denies it is competing. The comparer cannot tolerate your success because your success disrupts their internal narrative. In that narrative, they are the capable one, the promising one, the one who should be further ahead. Your visible progress is a threat to a story they have been telling themselves for years. Social media has amplified this dynamic to a level no previous generation ever experienced. Every achievement is now public. Every milestone is broadcast. And the person who struggles with comparison now has infinite fuel, an endless scroll of other people's highlights pressing against their insecurities 24 hours a day. But here is the deeper psychological truth. The comparer is fighting a war inside themselves. You are just the battlefield they chose today. Tomorrow, it will be someone else. And the year after that, someone else again. Your job is not to shrink so they feel larger. Your job is to stop measuring yourself against a ruler that was never meant to measure you. As the Stoics understood clearly, the only competition that matters is the one between who you were yesterday and who you are becoming. This one is the hardest to accept because this person actually loves you. That is not the question. The question is whether their love has the capacity to hold your growth, or whether it quietly works against it. The loyal betrayer is someone from your past. A parent sometimes, a lifelong friend, a partner who knew you before you changed. They were there in the darkness. They are woven into your history, and their loyalty is real. But loyalty to who you were is not the same as support for who you are becoming. When you begin to change, when you pursue something larger, think differently, move in new directions, the loyal betrayer feels it as a kind of abandonment, not because you are leaving them, but because you are leaving the version of you they understood, the version they knew how to love. And so, with the best of intentions and the worst of timing, they pull. They reference the past. They remind you of your failures. They invoke old versions of your story when you are trying to write a new one. This is what Jung called the persona prison, the cage built not by your enemies, but by the people who love your old mask so much they can't let you remove it. Nietzsche himself understood this intimately. He wrote that every great transformation requires a kind of death, and that the people who mourn the old self most loudly are often those closest to us. The loyal betrayer is not malicious. They are afraid of losing the version of you they know, afraid of what your change means for their own unlived possibilities. Compassion for them is appropriate. Distance, sometimes, is necessary. You cannot honor both your loyalty to the past and your commitment to becoming. Eventually, that tension must be resolved. This person is everywhere. They are the first to offer guidance when you face a decision. They have frameworks and theories and opinions refined across years of observation. They can tell you exactly how to build a business, fix a relationship, improve your mindset, structure your life. But look at their own life, and something quietly doesn't add up. The advice is impeccable. The execution is absent. Nietzsche had little patience for this archetype. He called such people theoretical men, those who live entirely in the world of ideas and use that world as a refuge from the demands of real action. They are comfortable dispensing wisdom because wisdom, when it lives only in the mouth, costs nothing. The psychological mechanism here is elegant and painful. By positioning themselves as your guide, they achieve the status of success without risking the vulnerability of pursuit. They become the mentor, the wise one, the experienced voice, while you take on all the uncertainty of actually trying. And when you fail, their authority is reinforced. I told you it would be difficult. When you succeed, they were there at the beginning. I helped shape that. The danger is not in listening to them once or twice. Ideas have value regardless of their source. The danger is in allowing their voice to become louder than your own instinct, in mistaking their theoretical confidence for earned wisdom, in handing your decisions to someone who has never paid the price of making one. The Stoics made a sharp distinction between knowledge and practice. Epictetus himself a former slave who built one of the most powerful philosophies of resilience in history, said it plainly: "It is not enough to know the good. You must live it, daily, under pressure, in the real world. Trust the person who has scars, not just opinions." The last type is perhaps the most seductive of all. This person agrees with everything you say. They reflect your opinions back to you with enthusiasm. They validate every decision. They never challenge you, never push back, never offer a perspective you haven't already thought of. It feels extraordinary at first. Finally, someone who truly understands you. But here is the hidden cost. Without friction, there is no refinement. Without honest challenge, your thinking calcifies. Without someone willing to tell you when you're wrong, you lose the one thing more valuable than confidence: accuracy. Carl Jung wrote that we do not grow in comfort. We grow in confrontation, with our own shadow, with the complexity of the world, and with the honest perspectives of people who care enough to challenge us. The mirror friend doesn't love you. They love the version of you that makes them feel accepted. And so they reflect that version endlessly, never asking whether it is your best one. Nietzsche called for something he named great friendship, a bond rare enough to be almost philosophical, a relationship where two people push each other toward their highest selves, not by agreeing with everything, but by caring too much about the other's growth to offer empty validation. The mirror friend is comfortable. That is the warning sign. Real growth is never entirely comfortable, and the relationships that serve your highest self will sometimes make you uncomfortable, not through cruelty, but through honesty. Why do the people closest to us become the ones most capable of holding us back? The answer begins with a concept that both Nietzsche and Jung circled around from different directions: the human terror of change. We are social creatures. We define ourselves through our relationships. And when one person in a relational system begins to change, to evolve, to rise, to expand beyond the established dynamic, it doesn't just affect them. It sends shockwaves through everyone connected to them. The people around you have built their sense of identity, partly in relation to who you are. Your role in the social system, the one who struggles, the one who needs guidance, the one who is a certain way, is also part of their identity. When you change, their identity shifts too. And that is terrifying. This is not philosophy. It is neuroscience. The human brain treats social displacement with the same alarm as physical threat. When someone we love becomes unfamiliar, the brain processes it as danger. So the undermining, the subtle sabotage, the well-meaning advice that keeps you small, none of it comes from evil. Most of it comes from fear, from insecurity, from the ego's desperate attempt to preserve its map of the world when the territory is changing beneath its feet. Nietzsche understood that becoming who you truly are is one of the most disruptive acts a human being can commit, not because the world is against you, but because growth itself unsettles the people who defined themselves in relation to who you used to be. And here is the deepest layer. The traits you find most infuriating in others are often the ones most alive in your own shadow. When the comparer irritates you, ask if there is comparison inside you. When the emotional vampire exhausts you, ask if you have ever used suffering to seek sympathy. When the advice giver frustrates you, ask if you have ever spoken from theory rather than practice. Jung was precise about this. The outer world is a projection of the inner one. The people who trigger you most powerfully are your greatest teachers, not because they are right, but because they are mirrors pointing at something you haven't yet faced in yourself. Now that you can see these dynamics clearly, the question becomes, what do you do about them? Here are 5 principles that are both ancient and immediately practical. The first is to observe without reacting. When you notice these patterns in someone close to you, your first instinct will be to confront, withdraw, or over-explain. Resist that instinct. The Stoics knew that the pause between stimulus and response is where wisdom lives. Observe first. Let the pattern become undeniable before you act on it. The second is to stop performing for your inner circle. Many people shrink themselves not because they are directly pressured to, but because they have learned which version of themselves is accepted in their closest relationships. Stop performing that version. Let the discomfort of being your full self in those spaces do its work. The relationships that can hold your full self will remain. The ones that cannot were always conditional. The third is to build what Nietzsche called your own table. Audit your inner circle with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, which of these people expand me, and which ones diminish me? You do not need to destroy relationships that diminish you, but you must stop treating them as your primary source of nourishment. Find the people who challenge you, who push you, who celebrate your growth rather than quietly mourning your change. The fourth is to set boundaries without explanation. You do not owe anyone a detailed justification for protecting your energy, your time, or your focus. Boundaries are not walls. They are the definition of what you will and will not accept into your most valuable resource, your attention. The people who demand explanations for your boundaries are often the ones who don't respect them. The fifth is to focus on what is within your control. This is pure stoicism. The behavior of the people around you, the subtle dynamics of social groups, the insecurities driving those who undermine you. None of this is within your control. What is within your control is your response, your standards, your direction, and the relentless, quiet work of becoming who you are here to be. Everything else is noise. These dynamics have always existed, but something has changed in the modern world that has made them sharper, faster, and harder to navigate. Social media has turned comparison into an ambient condition of daily life. Every person you know, and thousands you don't, now broadcasts their highlights in real time. The comparer has infinite ammunition. The subtle underminer has a platform. The mirror friend can now operate entirely through digital validation. And the attention economy has a specific interest in keeping you emotionally destabilized. Platforms are built to maximize engagement, and nothing generates engagement like outrage, envy, and insecurity. The algorithms are not neutral observers of human emotion. They are architects of it. At the same time, the rise of self-improvement culture has created a new and insidious version of the advice giver. An entire industry now exists of people monetizing wisdom they have never tested. Influencers who have never built the thing they are teaching you to build. Coaches who have never faced the struggle they are claiming to resolve. The distance between knowing and doing has never been wider, and never been harder to detect. Emotional intelligence is the skill most urgently needed in this environment. Not the surface-level version that talks about empathy in corporate seminars. The real version, the kind that requires you to see clearly, feel honestly, and still choose wisely under social pressure. This is what Nietzsche was pointing at. This is what Jung spent his life mapping. This is what the Stoics built their entire philosophy to address. The ability to look clearly at the people around you, to love them without being diminished by them, to stay connected without losing yourself, to remain warm without becoming naive. This is not a personality trait. It is a practice. And like all practices, it requires daily commitment. Here is what you now understand, that most people never will. The greatest threat to your becoming is not your enemy. It is not the person who openly opposes you, criticizes you, or stands in your way. Those people are visible. You can navigate what you can see. The greatest threat is the person inside your trust. The one whose voice has become so familiar, you've stopped examining what it's actually saying. the one whose comfort has become so essential you've stopped asking what it's costing. Nietzsche said it in a way that has echoed across more than a century. The snake that cannot shed its skin perishes. You are not the person you were 5 years ago. You are not the person your inner circle met when they first knew you. You are not the sum of the expectations that have accumulated around you over years of relationship. You are becoming, constantly, uncomfortably, irreversibly, and the work of protecting that becoming, of choosing the relationships that serve your growth over the ones that serve your stagnation, is not selfish. It is not cold. It is not a betrayal of loyalty. It is the deepest form of self-respect. And self-respect, as the Stoics understood, is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Look at your inner circle. Look with the eyes of someone who has just watched this video. Someone who now sees what was always there, but too familiar to examine. Not with judgment, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Because clarity is not the opposite of love. It is the most honest form of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." We would add only this: be one, and surround yourself with those who make being one more possible, not less. The dangerous people you trust the most cannot hold you back if you can finally see them clearly. Now you can.